Welcome to Building the Data Analysis Program. I'd like to start today off by telling you all the story of how I used data analysis to almost prevent a burglary. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking to yourself right now, we use data analysis for white-collar crimes, the Bernie Madoff type of crimes. So I'll tell you how it all started. I was having lunch with one of my audit clients, and he disclosed to me that he didn't feel safe in his workspace. This particular audit client was over the student union at a university. Now, personally, I've been out of school for a very long time, and when I was in school, the student union was one room with a snack stand, a pool table, and a Pac-Man video game. Today's student unions are multi-million-dollar, multi-use facilities. The one that this audit client managed had a large game room with Xboxes and various game consoles, restaurants, meeting spaces, office spaces, and probably over 100 rooms. He disclosed to me that he would come in the mornings when the student union was supposed to be closed and the doors were unlocked. So I could clearly understand why he did not feel safe in this building that had heavy foot traffic from student population. We informed him, performing an audit of the individuals who have entered and exited the building. And that was the beginning of our adventure. Most of us that work today access buildings and rooms and assets in our organization with some sort of swipe card technology. Where this particular organization, we used a physical key. And what you're viewing now is a picture of the key. This key was affectionately known as a smart key. And if you can picture someone doing air quotes and sarcastically saying smart key, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner of this key, you'll see a microchip that's kind of nudging out from the surface. Well, this was a smart key, quote unquote, for all practical purposes, but let's talk about how it really functioned and how it helped me to almost prevent a burglary. If you take a look at the two tiny black holes up top, this is where your security permissions are transmitted to the door. So it tells the door whether you can enter or exit a building. Here's a picture of an actual door lock. This was the actual lock to my office. So if I inserted that key, those four black holes would meet each other, and it would beep once to allow me to enter my office, or beep twice if I had been fired and denied entry. It also logged the activity. Now, the activity log occurred in the brain of the smart key system. This is the back of the door, and there's the brain. So all the data was stored locally for each individual door. The problem with that is none of the doors actually communicated with each other. So at this point, you're probably asking yourself, well, how did we get the data in order to analyze it? Well, someone from the lock shop maintains a master key. That master key works in every single door on campus. And they would walk to one door, stick the key in, download the data from that particular door, walk to the very next door, stick the key in, download the data, and so on until every single door's data was captured. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the student union had over 100 doors. The people from the lock shop downloaded the data for us, took it to the central computer, plugged it in, downloaded the data, and then printed out reports for us. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, what are you going to do with printed reports? And that's exactly what I asked them. So after a little bit of fussing and fighting, we were able to get the data that we needed in electronic format. We dumped the data into Excel, and we began analyzing it. The data showed us that there were typically unauthorized access attempts at several doors on the second and third floor between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, from that, we were able to conclude that someone was trying to break into the building and trying to break into specific rooms within the building. So our next step, each key was associated with a specific user, or so we thought. We analyzed the data and we determined that, well, there were duplicate keys. Some individuals had as many as 20, 30, even 40 keys assigned to them. So at that point, we just confirmed my audit client's suspicions. The next thing we did was we alerted management. We told each member of the executive staff that someone was trying to break into certain areas across campus and that they needed to be on guard. At this point, I don't think management really took us that seriously. I mean, after all, we were simply just auditors who were bringing awareness to something that was not yet tangible. You know, sometimes it's difficult for people to understand and see risk and issues if nothing has happened. However, a few weeks later, a break-in did happen, and it happened in the student union. Someone broke into a room and stole a small safe that had a small amount of cash and checks. A few weeks after that, someone broke into another room within the student union and stole a small amount of cash and checks. This was my first attempt to bring awareness to the power of data analysis. So at this point, while I figured I would ask for money to purchase data analysis software. So I put in a budget request, and it was denied. Now, I can say that eventually we were able to purchase a system, and we began performing data analysis. So today, I'm going to tell you my story, which is the journey on the road to start a data analysis program. It's full of ups and downs, and I hope you enjoy it. And I have 3 takeaways for us today. If you don't remember anything from the presentation, these are the 3 things that you need to do in order to build a data analysis program or sustain a good data analysis program. Number 1, you need to get buy-in. Number 2, you need to get good data. And number 3, you need to provide insight. Buy-in is definitely critical when you're first starting your data analysis program. However, I tend to argue that it's also important even if you have a well-seasoned, well-managed program. And if you think about it, this only makes sense. When you start off your data analysis program, you might save your organization $1 million. 10 years down the road, you're only saving them $1,000. So the interest in your program starts to wane. So every once in a while, you'll need to revive interest in your data analysis program, and we'll talk about how you can do that. Once you have buy-in, you need to make sure that you get good data, because bad data will break your data analysis initiative. After you have buy-in and after you've obtained good data, it's important that you provide management with useful information that's going to be insightful and help them make sound management decisions. So that's our agenda for today and what we're going to cover, and that leads us to our first polling question.
All right, so our first polling question is, what is your biggest pain point in your data analysis program? So we'll leave the polls open for another 30 seconds. So Robert, you should be able to see the results there. And it looks like getting good data is the biggest issue.
Okay. Yeah, I find that that often is a big problem, and we'll touch on that today. So I'm glad that that was one of the biggest concerns for people. So after the break-in debacle, management was still not convinced of the power of data analysis. So we began looking at purchasing card transactions. This is a staple for auditors, right? So we obtained a lot of transactions from our credit card provider. We dumped the data in Microsoft Excel and simply used the Control-F function. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's fine. You hit Control-F and you type in whatever it is you're looking for. So this was real easy for us. We searched for things like alcohol, cigarettes, and beer. And we found alcohol, cigarettes, and beer. Oddly enough, we also found things like dating websites, charitable donations to nonprofits, and we also found where one or two professors had purchased the services of ladies of the night. We compiled all of our data, reported it to management. So now you would think that after this, surely they'd have buy-in on a data analysis program, give us the funding for personnel and software. So I submitted my budget request, thinking this time it'll work. But the answer was still a big no. So the next thing that happened was a whistleblower came into my office. The whistleblower disclosed that traveling employees were double dipping on expense reports. So now here's the claim. She claimed that a manager would take employees out to dinner when they were traveling for out-of-town trips for training. The manager would pay for dinner on his company card. The employees would in turn come back and still claim dinner on their expense reimbursements. Now at this point, we had almost enough information to start analyzing the data. But the data was in two different systems. Those two different systems didn't talk well together, and so we would have to manually go through and try and locate these individuals. Well, fortunately, the whistleblower came back the next day and gave us names as well as dates. So we pulled the data from the system, and we matched up transactions with people. We found that, indeed, there were some employees who were double-dipping on their expense reports. We reported this information to management, and then the next budget request cycle, I'm sure you can guess what I did. I again put in a request for personnel and software to start a data analysis initiative. Now, at this point, when the budget request came in, I got a phone call. I thought that the phone call was going to say, "Congratulations, your request has been approved." But instead, there was a manager who made a comment saying, "Well, isn't it just adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing? This is something you should surely be able to use a 10 key for." We just predicted a burglary. We just found professors purchasing alcohol, cigarettes, and beer. And we just found people double-dipping on expense reports. I thought that this would be enough to jumpstart our data analysis initiative. So you can imagine how frustrated I was. But in the middle of all this madness, someone was watching. You see, these improprieties had happened in the purchasing card department and in the accounts payable department. Both of these departments reported to the controller. So the controller pulled me to the side one day and asked me, "What is this data analysis all about?" And we started talking about the possibilities. Now, the controller's budget is much bigger than mine. So she agreed to pay for the software. It's a good partnership for our data analysis initiative. We agreed that we'd work hand in hand. So as we implemented our software, the controller sent some of her personnel to the training, and we trained together. This was several years ago, and to this day, the controller still pays for the software and still provides training for her personnel. So essentially, what we did to jumpstart our program is we got buy-in. But I think that there are two important things that caused us to get buy-in. Number one, we found a problem. There was a problem in the purchasing card program. There was a problem in accounts payable with people double dipping. So once we found the problem, we found a partner. So what I would suggest to anyone who has a data analysis program or who's trying to start one, find a problem. If your program is old and you've not experienced many cost savings, or you've not found any anomalies in your processes in a while, go out, ask your clients, what are some of their pain points? And once you find that problem, find a partner that wants to fix the problem. So our takeaways for the day. Number one, get buy-in. We just talked about how you get buy-in. Find a problem, find a partner. Next, we want to get good data. So let's spend some time talking about data. The volume of data produced nowadays is ballooning at an alarming rate. It is literally a big ball of mess. And this poses significant problems for audit professionals. I was reading a survey recently from the Institute of Internal Auditors, and it said that I think the number was about 58% of chief audit executives don't trust the data that they receive from audit clients. And if you think about it, that's an extremely high number of CAEs who don't trust the data that they're receiving from audit clients. And as auditors, they tell us that the most reliable type of data that we can have is from third parties. But sometimes that's not true. November of last year, we were attempting to do some data analysis on our purchasing card data. This time we were attempting to do it with our newly purchased software. If you notice on the screen, what I have is a data set that we received from our credit card provider. Now, I've covered up the name of that provider to protect the guilty. But we had our system, we had our data, and we were ready to go off to start fighting purchasing card fraud. The particular cardholder whose transactions you are looking at purchased, well, who knows what they purchased. They purchased a bunch of stuff at a store called the Great Frame Up. Now, if you're not familiar with the Great Frame Up is, it's a store that sells frames, whether they be for pictures or mirrors or posters. So when one of my employees got a hold of this data, she started looking at it and said, well, the Great Frame Up in no way sells chia seeds or Publix hamburger buns or Kraft Chipotle. And so for those of you who don't know what Publix is, it's a grocery store chain in the southeastern region of the United States. So now this is data that we've obtained from a third party that's bad data. But as auditors, they tell us data obtained from third parties is more reliable from data obtained within our organization. So if you think about the IIA survey that said that a certain percentage of audit executives don't trust data coming from within, and obviously in certain instances we can't trust data coming from without, it sounds like we have a really tough situation on our hands. So let's talk about what makes good data. The data has to be accurate for number one and reliable for number two. And I think our chia seed purchase from the Great Frame Up was neither accurate nor reliable. But within that, there's several different types of data that you might see. You'll see what's called structured data. Then you'll also see what's called unstructured data. Now, our structured data, that's real easy. That's your Excel worksheet. That's your rows and columns where you have column headings and then the data is numbered 1 through whatever. That's the data that we're used to dealing with. You can dump that in Excel. You can dump it in Access. You can dump it in Idea. That's our easy data. Our unstructured data, however, that's the data that's been booming over the last several years. Unstructured data is the data that you see on social media websites, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, Twitter. And if you think about it, on Facebook alone, you can like something, you can poke someone, you can flirt with people, and someday you'll probably be able to scratch and sniff. But all of this activity is very unstructured. There's some industries currently that require organizations to try to bring some structure to this otherwise unstructured data. And if you think about it, the FBI, they profile potential criminals using social media. So they comb various social media websites, and they take all of this unstructured data, and they analyze it and try to put some sort of structure behind it. So there's definitely a problem with getting good data. The data has to be accurate. It has to be reliable. That data is going to be structured, and it's also going to be unstructured. So what is the secret? How do you get good data? Well, I believe that there are three things that will help you get good data. Number one, you need knowledgeable people. Number two, you need suitable software. And number three, you need a stable technical environment. So let's talk for a minute about knowledgeable people. I had a friend named Tim. Tim managed an internal audit shop where he had a data analysis program. He hired a really good IT guy named Chris to write scripts and queries for him. They called him Computer Chris. Chris was the backbone of the data analysis program because he was a former computer programmer. Now, mind you, this was historically when most data analysis software required some sort of technical knowledge and expertise. Now, Chris was at odds with a lot of the audit staff because he didn't really understand the data analysis process. And that process is you write queries, you run them, you have some false positives that might fall out. You update the queries, you run them again until you get a good working query. Now, seeing as how Chris was a computer programmer, for him the process was you write the tech specs, you design the program. And unless there are errors, you don't necessarily have to update or correct it. So there was tension between Chris and the audit staff. Not to mention, Chris recognized how valuable he was, so he kept strong-arming my friend Tim for more raises. And eventually, he was one of the higher-paid professionals in the audit department. Now, at some point, he pushed his luck a little too far, and Tim had to let Computer Chris go. And there went Tim's data analysis program. So I know I said that to get good data, you have to have knowledgeable people. And I think historically, knowledgeable people meant someone who could write scripts. Nowadays, I say knowledgeable people means people who will constructively question the status quo, as well as people who are willing to understand the business. So let me explain what I mean by that. The example that I gave you earlier from the great frame-up, the employee that actually found that error was a person who had less than 2 years of internal auditing experience, but had over 16 years of industry experience. And because she constructively questioned the status quo and understood the business, she was able to bring awareness to the fact that we had bad data. Okay, so getting good data means having knowledgeable people, but it also means having suitable software. So what kind of software do you need in order to get good data? Well, I think that depends on what you're doing. It depends on the complexity of the task that you're trying to perform, as well as the size of your data. Standard spreadsheet software like Excel is good for small tasks. I used Excel to detect and almost prevent a burglary. But beyond that, you may need to move into, well, database software like Microsoft Access. But you would soon tire of that because it's complicated and confusing and has limitations of its own. Now, if you're performing very complex functions and you have a large data set, which any person or department who's starting a data analysis program, your goal is to eventually do complex calculations and analysis with large sets of data. You need some sort of data analysis software. I am of the belief that there are at least 7 elements that define suitable software. Now, there are quite a few more than that, but I've been able to boil it down to 7 that are extremely important and should be on the top of anyone's list. Number 1, suitable software should be easy. You should be able to push the easy button. You should not have to rely on Computer Chris. Computer Chris should not be able to strong-arm you and ask you for raises and be the sole source of information within your data analysis initiative. The second thing is, well, suitable software should reduce your reliance on technical folks like Computer Chris and the folks who handle your hardware at your organization. The third thing is it should be bug-free. There should be very few errors coming out of your system. Next, it should be able to handle various file types, PDF files, text files, flat files, you name it. You should be able to import structured and unstructured data into your system. Next, it should definitely be able to handle what we're now calling big data. It should also have robust sort, search, and filter features. And last but not least, suitable software should be able to back up and retain your keystrokes automatically. So everything that you've done to construct the query should be recorded somehow so that you can recreate that query if necessary, or if you need to show someone else the steps that you've done, you can hand it off to someone else and they can recreate that query. So let's recap. Suitable software should be easy to use, minimize your reliance on IT professionals, reliable and bug-free, able to import a variety of file types, able to handle large volumes of data, have robust search, sort, and filter features, log the procedures performed. My favorite software is IDEA, obviously. It contains all of these features and then some. So, to build your data analysis program, you have to get buy-in, which means you need to find a problem, find a partner. Get good data, making sure that data is accurate and reliable. Getting good data means having knowledgeable people and suitable software. And that brings us to our next polling question.
Thank you, Robert. The next polling question. The perfect software will solve all of your data analysis issues. So we'll give everyone a minute to answer the question.
And I actually cannot see the poll results.
Oh, I will share those now. Can you see them now?
No, I cannot.
Oh. That's weird. Well, 77%, I don't know what happened there, sorry about that, Robert, but 77% of people said false. 7% said true, and 16% said maybe.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's great. And the majority rules. Software is not the end-all, be-all answer. It is not. So I have 2 tips for getting good data because software is not the end-all, be-all answer. Number 1, always second-guess your sources. And number 2, put the process in writing. So let's explore always second-guessing your sources. I'm sure you guys remember the great frame-up. This data was from a trusted third party, and it was flawed. But there's a little bit more to the story that I didn't tell you earlier. When we found that the data was flawed, we called the bank, and we said, the data that you all gave us was flawed. Well, and they said, the data that you've uploaded to your system was correct. So they sent over a data file as well, and that file was correct. However, the data in the reporting module was wrong for November, and they knew it. And they said that it might also be wrong for October and September as well. So always second-guess your sources. I think while you're second-guessing your sources, you need to make sure that you have knowledgeable employees who constructively question the status quo and understand your business. So the second thing is put the process in writing. Now what I mean by that is develop a query catalog. I cannot stress this enough. This is simply a catalog of all of your queries where you notate the name of the query using some sort of standard naming convention, the purpose of the query, the data owners, the sources of information, all things that are important to that particular query, notate them all on a log. This actually helps you with your data analysis program. Over time, what you'll start to see is it makes it easier to do things like, well, transfer queries to audit clients that may want to start now migrating from continuous auditing to continuous monitoring. You start to build a query inventory for your entire organization. You start to identify queries that other departments may own using other systems. So this is very helpful, and it's an extremely important part of the process. Okay, so to this point, we've talked about getting buy-in and how to get good data. Getting good data, I said we need knowledgeable people and suitable software. The last item was a stable technical environment. A stable technical environment is important because you don't want to get to work one day and discover that all of your hard work has disappeared. And by disappeared, I mean disappeared kind of like the picture that I had for this particular slide. I don't have much to say about this because this is a very short presentation, but anytime you buy a system, you will have some technical expertise that's needed from those who have the hardware, but you want to make sure that you have a system that is very stable, that's been tested, and is proven to operate in multiple environments over time. Now that brings us to our next polling question.
So our third polling question. Do you currently have a query catalog? So we'll give everyone about a minute to answer, and then I'll hopefully be able to share the results with you this time, Robert. So the results should be up on the screen. 20% say yes and 80% say no.
Wow, that's awesome for the 20%. Awesome. I cannot stress the importance of a query catalog enough. Okay, so to build and or maintain our data analysis program, again, we need to get buy-in. We need to get good data. And last but not least, we need to provide some sort of insight to management. And the big question is, how do we provide insight? So I'm going to tell you a story about providing insight. We were tasked with analyzing the travel spending at our organization. So we got all of our travel data, dumped it into IDEA, and began crunching the numbers. We were able to tell management exactly what was happening and why it was happening. And what was happening was we were spending a majority of our airfares with Delta. Now, when we dug a little deeper and started asking questions, this made a whole lot of sense. We were located in Jacksonville, Florida, which is on the east coast of the United States. You can see in red, Jacksonville. The closest major airline hub was in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where Delta is headquartered. From Atlanta, you could fly to almost anywhere in the world. Now, we were very proud of ourselves for finding that out. But essentially, what we'd done is we'd given ourselves a big pat on the back for telling management something that a 5-year-old could have told them after running the numbers. But then one of my employees began asking different questions. He asked, how can we use this information to our advantage, and where are there opportunities to exploit this type of knowledge? So what he came up with was, well, really a brilliant idea. He recommended that we, first of all, enroll in Delta's Business Frequent Flyer program. Now, that frequent flyer program allows double dipping. So those of you on the call today, you could be a hero at your organization if you suggest this. What it does is, as individuals, you accumulate points, and the organization accumulates points simultaneously. Now, I work in higher education. What we ended up doing with that is we recommended that the points that we accumulate, we use them for student study abroad programs. And for those of you who don't know what that is, a study abroad program is where a student gets to travel to another country and, well, study. Those programs are fairly expensive, but the bulk of the expenses are typically the airfare to get to the other country. So we suggested that we use the points to purchase tickets for students on a scholarship basis. So now, not only did we build goodwill with our primary stakeholders, our students, but we actually saved a little bit of money because some of those miles could be used for faculty and staff travel as well. So I think that those are the types of insights that we need to start bringing to our management team. And so the big question is, how do we start bringing those types of insights? Well, if you notice, initially we told management what was happening and why it was happening. The what was we were spending a majority of our money with Delta. Why? Well, because we were in Florida and the Atlanta, Georgia hub was the closest big hub to us. But as soon as we migrated from asking what and why and asking where and how, we started providing our organization with some real insight. And we've done this on a few other projects, and the response was enormous because we were now providing real valuable insights instead of just giving them information. So, building your data analysis program. First thing is get buy-in. Now, to get buy-in, I want you to go find the problem. Problems are everywhere in our organizations. Once you find the problem, find a partner that is willing and able to help you fix it. The next thing we need is, well, good data, because bad data can ruin your data analysis initiative. So how do we get good data? Well, getting good data means that we must have knowledgeable employees, suitable software, and a stable technical environment. After we get good data, we have to provide some sort of insight. And how do we provide insight? Well, I think that we provide insight by moving from answering the questions what and why and to answering the questions where and how. And I want to thank you for attending this session. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've listed my contact information here if you desire to contact me afterwards.